Hello there, welcome back to the Closet Historian. Today we're going to be talking about something near and dear to all of our hearts, how to build a vintage style wardrobe. Now this is of course something that I have myself done, and I thought I would give you guys some of my tips and tricks, things I've learned along the way, how I have done this myself, how I built my vintage style wardrobe, so that hopefully that can help some of you guys who want to be doing the same, or even if you already have vintage style, there might be some tips in here that are things you can relate to, or that might still be helpful. So hopefully that'll be interesting for all of you guys. So this will be the first in a series of videos I hope to do here on the channel. And today we're starting with both patience and analysis, which sounds really boring, but let's get into it. Patience, because you're going to need to be doing some research first, and that of course takes a little bit of time. Patience, because you're going to want to transform your whole wardrobe overnight, and that's just probably not going to be possible unless you have a lot of capital to throw at the problem, which congratulations. And then also patience, because it's going to be really easy to just hit buy now and start shopping before you really have nailed down what you are even looking for or what will work for you within vintage style, and so you're going to need some patience in regards to shopping as well. So that's why I really advocate for being careful at the beginning. One of the easiest mistakes to make when transferring from one style into another, transferring from say modern clothes into vintage style wardrobe, is to buy things just because they look vintage. Now vintage is a huge broad category. We're talking about anything from the 20th century. Of course you can dress even antique if you want to go way back. Vintage eras are usually used as inspiration for modern fashion even. So you can find things at ModCloth, you can find things in stores still, you can find things at thrift stores, you can find things from repro companies, but a lot of times it's easy to start buying things just because you immediately you have a gut reaction that, oh, that looks vintage, better add it to my cart. And it's although this can sometimes work out, this also can lead you to making some mistakes and improper investments, I guess. It's important to not snap things up just because they tick one of these little boxes I'm about to go through. It's really easy to do that, and I think that's where I really want to caution you guys to be careful when building your wardrobe, because I just know how eager you are to get it all together, but you have to be patient, I told you. So one of the things you want to keep in mind the most when you start shopping to build your vintage style wardrobe is going to be, of course, fit. Fit is extremely important. You can't wear clothes that don't fit you now, can you? So when you measure yourself, you're going to want to be very honest about these measurements, and you're going to want to compare them to the measurements listed by the seller for the clothes. I have seen people on Etsy who just list things as small, medium, and don't give you any more detail than that. You can message those people and ask them if they will give you measurements. And if they don't have measurements anywhere listed or aren't responsive, I would not take the risk on that item, because their version of medium may be very different from your version of medium. So you really want to have precise measurements, and then you want to be very honest with yourself about your measurements so you will know that the item will fit and you won't be disappointed when it arrives. You do have to keep in mind ease is something that you're going to be wanting to look for when buying clothes online, because you can't try them on. You really don't know how much ease the person may have built into their measuring, but usually people measure the clothes quite exactly. So if they say it has a 15-inch waist when laid down flat, that means it's going to have a 30-inch waist, which means if you also have a 30-inch waist, that is not going to fit you. That will be a little bit too small. You want to build in at least an inch of ease when it comes to things like tops and dresses, things that are closer to the body. When it comes to items like suiting or coats, you want to have as much as 5 inches of ease. You could want to have a lot of ease built in with a thicker, more tailored garment, just so that it sits properly on your body. And I know this is hard because maybe you'll find something that looks gorgeous, it's perfect, and the measurements are right on, the same as yours, but that means that the item is going to be too small. So again, have patience in this regard, keep looking, you will find eventually something in your size. I know for larger sizes this is harder, believe me, because even at my size, I'm about a 42 bust, 30 waist, and then 44, 45 hip. Usually that it's really hard for me to even find things. So I know larger measurements than that, it can be super rare to hard to find things, but that's where we come into things like reproduction and hopefully sewing eventually too. So those are things that we can help in that regard, but fit is super important, size, all that kind of stuff. So obviously that is going to be the first thing you are looking for. The next thing you're going to think about when considering an item to add to your wardrobe is going to be the style of that item. And in this, I actually don't mean the style in relation to whether it's kind of goth or like super glamorous or very Betty Draper. I mean style in relation to the shape of the garment, the silhouette of the garment, and whether or not that is a style you like on your body. Everyone has different shapes that are more or less flattering, or that they feel are more or less flattering. And you're going to want to find out which shapes of like skirts, sleeves, things like that make you feel like $1,000,000 and are the styles that you're going to go for again and again and pull from your closet, because when things don't fit the styles you like in regards to silhouette, you won't reach for them out of your closet, and it will turn out to be a bad investment. So another thing after fit to keep in mind is style. The next thing that I consider when I am shopping for things for my own wardrobe is versatility. Of course, if you get something like a button-down white blouse, that is going to match so many things, as opposed to something that's like a novelty print, bright colored something that you may not have a ton to wear with that. So you want to consider how versatile an item is. The more you have built up your wardrobe, the less this kind of matters, because of course you're going to come across spectacular, one-of-a-kind pieces or cocktail dresses you just have to have that aren't necessarily versatile things that you can build your wardrobe with. But when you're starting out especially, you want to get things that are very much mix and match so that you can expand the visual size of your wardrobe without actually having to add a ton of items. So things like really versatile separates are going to be important to building your vintage style wardrobe in the beginning. So of course, remember versatility. Something else you're going to want to consider when shopping for vintage or just used clothing in any way, shape, or form is going to be, of course, the older the item, the more possible condition problems there are going to be with it. So of course, this can mean stains, tears, problems with the fabric, problems with the pattern bleeding into the other areas of fabric. Maybe you can't wash it, or it's been washed improperly in the past, or it's been ironed improperly in the past. Maybe there are moth holes. There's a lot of potential condition problems when it comes to vintage clothing, especially because some of it is extremely old. If you imagine clothing from the 1930s, you would imagine it would be quite fragile at this point and may have come in contact with a lot of various problems over the years. So where your personal line is on how am I going to have to take care of this item, mend it, or deal with condition issues. Of course, things in poor condition are going to be cheaper, but I think it's better to save up for something in a better condition just because it will serve you longer. You will have to do less work on that item. And it's really easy to think, oh, this jacket is only, this great 40s suit jacket is only $25. And it's like, there's probably going to be a reason why a great wool suit jacket is only $25, and it's probably gonna be moth holes. That's one of the biggest things for me is actually moth damage on an item, because I am very, very afraid, because I have nice wool things, to put like a coat with a lot of moth damage in my closet, even if it's like something that's maybe like under the collar and you won't see it when it's being worn. I have a great fear of clothes moths. So if something has a lot of moth damage, I am almost would rather not buy it just in case there are any live moth problems that I would not want to introduce into my closet. So these are the kind of concerns you might want to think about when building a vintage wardrobe or a thrifted wardrobe. Just make sure you look at condition and decide your kind of personal line on what you think is okay, what kind of damage you are willing to accept and not accept. Of course, the last consideration when adding things to your vintage wardrobe is going to be the price. You want to find things in your price range and things that are going to work for you. Sometimes you might have to save up for some items. Some things in vintage are more expensive than other things. For example, like a nice petticoat, I think it's worth saving for like a Malcolm Mo's petticoat over the scratchy Amazon ones. You can get a petticoat on Amazon for like $10, but it's just not going to be nearly as comfortable or lay as nicely as, say, a professional Malcolm Mo's petticoat, which are super soft and are really well made and things like that. So you might want to save up for some items, and just kind of the more you research and are within the community of vintage, the more you will learn what a good price for something is, so you don't end up paying too much for something or maybe too little and end up having it be something that there was a reason they priced it so low. Maybe the condition was off, things like that. So you just want to be careful with price, and of course, stick to your budget. Never, you don't want to ever make a bad investment, which I say you should never make a bad investment, but of course I have done this. This is why I'm cautioning you. You are going to make mistakes eventually, but it's important to just really consider the price of things going in. And this is a main consideration for me, certainly, because it's really easy to convince yourself that you should buy that item because it's vintage and another one won't pop up maybe, for years, which is true and makes it really easy to overspend when building a vintage wardrobe. So it's just something to be conscious of and careful about. Now, I said we'd be covering two things mainly in this video, and the first was having patience, and the second is analysis. So you're going to want to analyze a couple of things, and of course, starting out, you're going to want to figure out which kind of style you are actually interested in. You're going to want to narrow down what your style actually is, because you can't just start buying things willy-nilly, and you're going to end up, with a really disparate wardrobe doing that just because you're just buying things because they look vintage, which you want to narrow down your style a little bit more. That way you know what you're doing when you're building a vintage wardrobe. And the easiest way, of course, to do this is to have a Pinterest board. Naturally, I advocate for research all the time here on this channel, but I'm going to advocate for research again. Really look into the areas that you're most interested in, and then just start pinning images, pinning outfits that you like, pinning colors you like together, pinning vintage that you like, vintage images, everything onto one Pinterest board, like my style or whatever. And then when you go through and look at that board later, you might be able to see certain consensuses forming in that board. So maybe you'll notice that, you have more 50s than anything and you notice that you like 1950s style more. Or maybe it will be within that kind of like more shirt dresses and very prim, bright colors, things like that. Or it will be sophisticated, very sleek, like suiting and in more muted colors. These are the kind of things you want to see a pattern in the things that you like to hopefully be able to build your wardrobe in that way or leaning in that direction so you don't end up making mistakes buying, a really frilly vintage dress because it's on sale when really you are more of a sophisticated person and you'll never end up wearing it. So things like this are of course important to consider as well. I kicked the camera, you guys. The other thing too is that you can mix vintage style with other styles. So maybe you're into a sort of like 1950s look and a goth look together, which can be very glamorous. Or maybe you like 50s things, but you didn't realize you liked mostly super casual 50s clothes. Or maybe more like subculture-y things, like you really like mod style, or you really like beatnik style. And it's easier to see those patterns once you start getting more in depth and doing more research on vintage style. So it's important to sort of find your style within vintage style. It's something I've actually talked about before, especially on my blog before. So I will have some links below talking more about this at the end of the video. You're also going to want to analyze what you already have in your wardrobe. So there may be things in your even modern wardrobe that will work for your new vintage style. Maybe that's that black pencil skirt your mom bought you for college interviews 6 years ago. Turns out that's going to come in handy. Or maybe a cardigan you have that you feel is kind of frumpy, but if you tuck that thing in, suddenly it's very 50s and it works really well. And this is where you have a lot more flexibility in things that may be sort of vintage but not your exact style because you already own them. It's not an additional investment. It's not a mistake you're making. Just figuring out how to style your current clothes in a more vintage way, a way that will work for you in between while you build the rest of your vintage wardrobe. So analyze your closet and figure out what is going to work for your new style and what will not. Of course, once you know what you have that you have to work with, you can decide what you need to get next, what you need the most to fill in the gaps in your wardrobe to start building on top of the items that you already have. Maybe, for example, you have a lot of blouses and sweaters that will work for a vintage look, but you don't have any skirts or wide leg 40s trousers or things like that to wear with those blouses. So you know that bottoms are something you need to focus on first when it comes to separates. Or maybe you notice you have a lot of dresses, but you don't have very many separates. These are the kind of things you want to identify within your closet. That way you can shop strategically moving forward. So that's the next analysis you need to do, what is missing from your closet. Now, perhaps you are starting at square one and you're thinking, can you just tell me exactly what I need to buy? And I'm glad that you think I'm some kind of expert. Thank you. But it's really hard for me to define exactly what you should be getting when building your vintage wardrobe because everyone's style is so different and you may have completely different style than me. And therefore, it's hard for me to recommend specific things you should be adding to your wardrobe. But I will give you a short, very basic list for if you are completely lost and you're like, please just tell me what to buy. Starting out with vintage style, I suggest a blue, black, brown, or otherwise solid colored skirt or skirts. Plural. These can be A-line skirts, circle skirts, pleated skirts, pencil skirts, whatever you like best, whatever suits your style most, what suits your body shape most. Having neutral or solid skirts are going to be a great building block to be able to build a versatile vintage style wardrobe. Of course, this also applies to trousers if you're more of a trouser person. So look for good, solid, basic skirts. In this same train of thought, solid, nice blouses in basic solid colors are going to actually work very well for building a vintage wardrobe. An ivory blouse, a black blouse, maybe a color that you particularly like. These are going to mix and match with those skirts that we just talked about. And mixing and matching is important when you have a smaller wardrobe in the beginning so you can make it look like you have more outfits even when you don't. Similar to blouses and shirts, a few simple sweaters in nice colors that you find flattering or that you like, again, will match with all of those different skirts and add even more versatility to your wardrobe. And then something that I really recommend that maybe even you start out with is a little black dress in the era of your choice. Whether this is actual vintage or reproduction, having a little black dress, something that's in the mid-range of formality, maybe a rayon, a wool, a knit even, something you can dress for day and dress up for evening. This is going to be a super versatile, the kind of piece you can turn to in your wardrobe when you have nothing to wear. A little black dress, it's classic for a reason, and I think it's really good to pick one up or make one or find one or get a reproduction one in the style that you like. It's just such a good basic piece that'll serve you so well for so many different occasions. Little black dress. And then the last thing on this short list of suggestions is going to be red lipstick, which is, you'll note, not a clothing item, but again, I've said it before on this channel and I will say it again, vintage style hair and makeup will make you seem like you have vintage style even if you're wearing modern clothes. It's just something that's an easier thing to acquire. It just, costs a $2 lipstick down at Walgreens and learning to curl your hair. So it's like a low cost entryway into vintage style. And if you just wear your clothes that you have now with red lipstick and curled hair, it's going to look more vintage. It's just magic that way that works. But remember, of course, above all, you must have patience. These are just my tips and tricks for starting out when building a vintage wardrobe, but of course I would like to leave you the opinions of others as well. So down in the description below, you're going to find a couple of posts I linked to from Jessica of No Accounting for Taste. She has impeccable style, great Instagram if you haven't checked her out already. She also has a great series of posts on this topic on her blog that are really detailed and really great. So I recommend if you are looking into building a vintage wardrobe that you check out those blog posts. I'm also going to link to 2 blog posts from another Jessica over on Chronically Vintage, a now archived blog that is a huge and great resource for people who love vintage style. Definitely go through that blog in general if you haven't already. There is no longer any new updates, but you should go and look through that still because it is a huge and great resource. So I've linked 2 of her blog posts below on this subject as well. And then I've linked a couple of my own blog posts because I'm a narcissist and I want you to go check them out. So all those links will be in the description below. Next time on this series, I will be going into more detail about my own shopping strategy and how I build my wardrobe now. So we'll be talking about that in more detail next time. But if you guys have any specific questions on in regards to this topic, building a vintage wardrobe, shopping for vintage or vintage style things, anything like that, please do leave them in the comments below and I will hopefully be able to incorporate them into a future video or just at least answer them for you. And thank you guys, of course, for tuning in today and I hope this was helpful. I'll see you again soon. Bye. Shit. I kicked the camera, guys. Now I said we would be already. I need water. I made a mistake.